So hi everyone and welcome. I'm Kirsten Winkler of kirstenwinkler.com, and today I got questions for Yoni Cheifetz, the Managing Director Israel of Lightspeed Venture Partners. Welcome to Questions, Yoni.
Thank you.
The latest news, Google changed some things in their algorithm. Some people are not so happy about those results. Who better could I ask than you, as a mathematician and of course computer scientist? What's your take on that? Is it just normal? Will it adapt after some time, or is it really that something significant changed?
I don't know the details enough, but I think that we've been experiencing changes to Google algorithms once or twice a year. Most companies that rely heavily on search, results from Google, typically experience that. If you look at what drives ranking on Google, which is a mixture of website structure, inbound links, and content, I think as the web matures, search engines and Google specifically being the largest one are trying to kind of do battle against people hacking their algorithms to drive traffic to, I won't call them inappropriate, but to sites with content that is not worth as much to users. So I think it's an ongoing. I don't think this is drastically different than what we've experienced before. And it will continue. These guys will find ways to hack the new algorithm. Google will make additional changes. So I would count on at least one significant change a year.
Oh, I'm sure of that it's just an ongoing process. The question is, as Mahalo reacted quite quickly in 10% layoffs due to this dip in their ad incomes, and then some others also. So do you think Google is going into that direction, that they actually evaluate quality much more than being a pure search engine before? And I myself, as a content creator, I don't think so much as an end user, but as a content creator, I ask myself, of course, how can they basically evaluate and judge over the utility of content on the end user side? How can a machine programmed algorithm do that and not a person or a human working on that?
Well, there are companies today that use machines to create content that that basically is part of what Google is trying to avoid. If you think of hotel reviews, building a machine that can look at existing hotel reviews, change them around a little, and create similar reviews that are different enough to be counted. Those things are being done today, and I think that's the battle that Google is trying to take care of. It's a hard task. I would ask whether a human can look at two pieces of content and tell which one was done by a human and which one was done by a machine. I'm not sure. I think the fact that they do take care of this is actually good. I think it's the next step would be to create very specific guidelines as to what they require, which I think that's part of the issue, is that things are very vague. And
I think so. Just deducing from one blog post what do the changes include and what is now bad and what is good is a little bit hard, at least to find out. And it's like a little bit, if I would come with Goethe now, it's a little bit the spirits that I called for Google as well. They know that people only create those sites for maybe not so qualitatively high content as there's a big search volume. So on the other hand, people know that others or end users search for it. So it's but but of course I see that you have to do something on keeping the quality high, or making the experience even better for the customers then. But probably some more precise guidelines, they could come with that in the near future.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm not sure they will, because it will make the job for, call it, the content hackers easier.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so so we will see what happens in the coming weeks. Let's get a little bit into education. What trend in online education excites you personally at the moment, and what from the investor VC perspective is particularly appealing?
okay, so I think the sector in general in the last 2 or 3 years is gaining more interest from the investment community. If you look at the big change, I think the internet. First of all, education is a big problem. Okay, I mean it's a problem everywhere. There's a big audience, and I think the change that the internet has brought, it has brought the capability to deliver education to the consumers and not just go through the school systems. Historically, you talk to VCs about education, and they'd walk into the other side of the street, because you'd have to go through the school systems, very very political, hard budgets. Everybody knows that it's important to improve them, but changes there are really, really slow. So I think in the areas which have seen lately kind of the advancement are, higher education is probably the first one. So online universities, have already built big companies, probably will continue to do so. Some of them in specific sectors, okay, that will combine also online and physical studies, because some of these, if you want to study to be a nurse, there's part theoretical stuff that you can do on a machine, and you actually need to go on some hands-on training and things that need to be done in classrooms. So we're already seeing companies that are kind of mixing campus work with online work and making it more cost-effective. If you look at language, okay, for example, I think the two big issues which people have are, one is language, which really the globalization of the internet is making English the language. It's the there are other languages that are spoken by a lot of people, but I think the one that's used to, for international commerce and communication is really English. It's many billions of people that are basically studying, using, and looking to study more in these languages. So that's an exciting field. Okay. And the ability to provide people with tools that make it easier to converse in in English, to learn English, to write English, to read English, is probably going to, it's already generated some companies that are public companies on NASDAQ. Most of them, if you recall, were actually not built online. So Rosetta Stone, it has online offerings today, but it was built
Came from the boxes, and then of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think today's model, can be much, much more efficient. I think, in kind of the K-12 space, the main place where I see excitement is math, and the reason is that it's very global. It's taught very similarly everywhere in the world. There's relatively little language dependence in most of what's taught there, and it's, unfortunately, the hardest subject for most of the students. So if you look at where people take private lessons, probably, I don't know the exact stats, but math is probably high on the list.
I think so. Okay. Then something that also concerns Lightspeed. So we saw Pearson recently acquire Tutor Vista, a company Lightspeed invested in before. So even though, if I'm correctly informed, this was not an Israeli deal but more an Asian one, I think. However, can you tell us a little bit what was exciting about Tutor Vista, that you put money in it, and then was the exit towards a Pearson exit somewhat logic in that respect?
Okay, so you're correct. I'm not the guy responsible for that company at Lightspeed. It's basically an Asian-U.S. deal. It was done out of our U.S. group, but had a big operation in India. If you look at the market, that Tutor Vista had really two businesses. One business is an online tutoring
Right.
business, which was the original business, and then it built up an educational services business to schools in India, which was a separate, another unit inside Tutor Vista. I think both were of similar sizes. They're two very interesting markets. I think if you relate to the first one, I think private tutoring in the U.S. is the numbers I've heard are $5 to $6 billion a year.
Huge.
Very fragmented. So in high school, lots of kids basically go to take private lessons. Prices in the U.S. are, I think, around $80 an hour. Pretty expensive.
Pretty, yeah.
And I think Tutor Vista was basically looking to make that more efficient by providing offshore tutoring through kind of electronic services. I think in the next few years, at least I've seen a bunch of companies that are going to offer even more efficient ways of kind of making that market efficient. There are still, I think Tutor Vista's lowest price was like $100 a month. And going upwards, which is cheaper than $80 an hour, but still, a significant price for somebody who needs a lot of lessons. You'll see other forms of answers to that questions, like short videos that are teaching these subjects that are very searchable, that are in a very kind of format. You'll see groups of children, working together. So I think we've just seen the beginning of what's happening in that segment of the market. I think the markets of providing educational services in growing economies. There's we in the West have forgotten that we need to educate our kids. So if you look at how much we spend on education versus other things,
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
That's very different in some of the countries like India, China, Korea.
That's right. Yeah.
So providing these services and helping schools become much more effective is a big business in those places. So I think that's what, and the big guys like Pearson are kind of becoming aggressive and kind of moving into the new online or technology-based education world.
Yeah, well, as they have an enormous financial power, and as they see opportunities, apparently more and more coming from that space or segment of the market, of course, it's getting more interesting for these big players, I think.
Yep.
So, however, it actually leads to my next question. Many people are still waiting for somewhat the mass market adoption in Education 2.0. So, in your opinion, what do you think is the market still lacking, that it's not that massively coming as many or as some people have thought over the past 2 or 3 years, that in 2011 we would have been a step further than we actually are today?
I think the basic thing that is causing slower adoption is learning is hard.
It's not necessarily the most fun thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think everybody, and we can look at two different segments of the market. Let's talk about kids and let's talk about grown-ups, because I think those are, learning is done from different motivations. We force our kids to learn. You'll ask 10 kids, 9 of them will tell you that they'd rather go to the beach than go to the schools. You'll find some nerds, okay? But that's not, you can't build business on those, because I think they're a small part of the children population. So I think motivating kids is an interesting part of education. Motivation, can come from tiger moms in the U.S., which force their kids. It's not so much in the U.S., but it's other, it's things that are immigrating to the U.S. But most moms in the U.S. aren't tiger moms, and I think therefore people will seek other motivations. I've seen people offer children all kinds of experiments with offering them compensation for learning, and compensation doesn't have to be cash. Compensation can be a lot of other things. Kids today, they're online. They basically play online. They spend a lot more time online. They don't go to the soccer field. They basically go to Facebook and
it could be something like virtual goods they get for learning success.
So I think you're going to see kind of a mixture of the world of entertainment and education. It's still really hard to make learning fun. Okay, so the learning itself. You need to kind of exercise your brain for most of it. I think grown-ups is a different thing. I think, and that's why adoption of kind of online universities has been a lot easier than kind of the things in the K-12 space.
Let's come to something dear to your heart, as you invested and, you also take some engagement in a company called Ginger Software. So, and what Ginger does is basically that they, in a very elaborate and sophisticated way, attack the heavy, text correction and grammar correction market. So, what made it so interesting for you to get in that space?
Okay, so first of all, let me clarify. It's not a Lightspeed investment. It's an investment of my own. The CEO is a close friend of mine for many, many years, so that's where I know the company from, and actually helped her found it. Why do I believe in the space? It's a mixture of, the reasons that brought me to invest are three. First of all, I think education is a good cause. I actually think this market, which I'll explain in a minute, is a huge opportunity. And, the people in the company are dear to me, and I believe in them. So going more specifically, why do I think it's interesting from an investor point of view? If you look at what Ginger does, it's really all about improving English. It will give someone all of the tools, basically a grammar and spell checker that will correct, quote unquote, every mistake anyone on earth makes in English. Okay, it's not going to be every, but it's going to be 95% of those mistakes. So that's the basic product, and it'll work on any platform, and eventually will be available, and to the mass market for free. Then it'll give you a reading assistance, so it'll text-to-speech that basically can read out anything you see on your machine if you can't read it yourself, or help you with pronunciation. It will provide you with a personalized learning tutor, so it tracks everything you write, okay? And because of its sophisticated context-based algorithms, it understands in which part of the language you actually make mistakes. So instead of going now and learning English with a course which you take and goes from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3, it'll basically provide you really short content lessons on the specific topics that you need, which actually reflect your mistakes inside those lessons. This is something that doesn't exist today, and it will provide you enrichment for your language. So if you just went to Berlitz and you learned a little bit of English and you know a few words, and you need to write a sentence, you'll punch in 4 words, and it'll give you all of the correct sentences in English that you can structure with those words to the context that you're trying to write. So this is
awesome.
The dream of anybody who needs to speak English. There's 1 billion people out there that need it, even more than that. I think if you give them, that's the market we're trying to attack. It's a really interesting market. That's why space is interesting.
And would you then say, generally spoken, asynchronous or the synchronous part or segments of the market is more promising?
So you're saying on kind of when you say synchronous or asynchronous, you're talking about
Synchronous generally said live, doing something with live interaction with a
like a
person.
tutor.
Like a tutor, for example, or doing something at your own pace when you want, where you want.
Well, I think there's space for both. I actually think the more cost-effective model from building an interesting company is the asynchronous one. If you need to put a tutor for each student learning, it's really hard to scale those businesses at a cost-effective manner. One of the reasons that something like Ginger is interesting to me because there's no human involved; it's a machine, and yeah, it does cost us a little bit to serve each user, but the model is very cost-effective. So I can see the company scaling to 1 billion users and with no problem.
Right. Okay. Coming to the last complex of this interview. So let's say from the investor VC perspective, a company in the education space contacts you and has a first talk or seeks for investment. So what are the points you generally look at, and what are the steps this company, a theoretical company, has to then pass and go through?
Okay. So, we're a relatively large fund. Lightspeed, the current fund we're investing out of, is an $800 million fund. And therefore, we typically look for investments which can become very large companies. It basically revolves around three things. I think I need to understand that this company has a large enough market that it's attacking. Typically, we look for companies that the longer-term market is bigger than $1 billion. It can start smaller, and it can actually enter the market in a specific niche of that market, but the overall market that it can expand to needs to be large enough. I think the second part, the innovation part, needs to be defensible. By that, it doesn't have to be technology. It can either be technology, or there needs to be something about the business model, something that that is going to be held up once other people come into that market, because we assume that every large market will have enough competition. And I think the management team needs to be capable. It needs to be people that can execute on the plans that they build that are, I'd say, positively aggressive enough. Okay, so there are a lot of internet companies which don't require a lot of money, can build small, nice businesses.
More like lifestyle businesses, yeah.
Yeah, make the founders happy. It's really not for us. Okay, so that would not fit. And typically it's not very different from any other company we meet. We depending on the stage, we invest in anything from seed deals with 2 founders and a PowerPoint to late stage deals which are in the tens of millions of revenues. So the due diligence we do depends on which stage the company is at.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say that was some great insights on both the education field and, of course, also from a VC perspective. So, Yoni, thank you so much for your time today, and was a pleasure talking to you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks.